Okay, so we are here. This is the Build Mastermind, and we do this the same time every week, 1 o'clock Eastern time, 10 p.m. Pacific, and then all the other ones in the middle. And today, we're going to talk today about building conversion skills that work. So we're going to, Ed, myself, Rachel will dive in and talk through this, but we're probably going to ask for some participation here as well. I think this is really important because we can talk to people, but if we're not converting, then we're not eating, we're not, and we're not helping people achieve their goals, truthfully, is what it all comes down to. And some of the stuff we wanted to talk about is one of the important things when it comes to conversion is tracking. And we need to actually track what we do when we're converting. And some of the numbers, I know I utilize CSU. It doesn't matter what system you utilize, but having a system where you're actually tracking the numbers and tracking what, where you're getting from there. And I know for us, I'm actually going to share my screen if I can find it here. Where did I put that? Really, what I wanted to just pull our stuff up here, just to kind of go over what are the things that we're actually looking at on a regular basis, is how many conversations we're having with people. And then from there, what is the conversion between the conversations, the appointments set, the appointments met, to the buyers or sellers signed, to the buyers or sellers under contract, and the buyers or sellers closed. And we look at these as a team every week. I sit down and I go through these with the agents every time I meet with them for a one-on-one. And we look at what was it last year, because really in the end, we need to know what these numbers look like and where are we trending, because I know, as a team, there's certain things where we tend to have really high numbers on, and some of them that we struggle with. And I think we can look at each of our numbers, because if we're not doing this, we don't know where we're actually succeeding and where we're failing. So I just wanted to pull that up just to talk about those few things. And stop sharing there, is really looking at those and ensuring that you're beating what you were doing before. And if I'm going and setting a bunch of appointments, and we've gone through it before, we set a bunch of appointments and then they're not getting that. Mm-hmm. Which means we're probably not having the right conversations with the people when we're setting the appointments, where they actually see a value to meet somebody.
And Jim, I think that this is a great foundational kind of topic for the overall lead conversion skill topic, because when you track everything, right? When you're tracking the set, the met, the signed, the pending, now you can actually start deducing what area of conversion that you need to be building your skill sets in, right? So we did the exact same thing. We actually just did this in our team meeting on Tuesday, where we looked at everybody set their rocks for the rest of this quarter, kind of the traction system. And we had said, okay, if I know that, what our ISA right now, his set to met ratio is 80%. He's 90%. He's 90 days into the team. That's fantastic. That's a really great, conversion. But then, met to signed was, actually really high. It was like 90%. But that's where we can say, okay, if I'm setting 5 and I'm only meeting 2 of those, obviously I have a phone conversion problem, right? Or if I'm meeting them and I'm not signing them, okay, now I know I have an in-person conversion problem, right? I think deducing and understanding which part of the lead conversion you need to build your skill sets in is totally key. So does anybody else in here use CSU or some sort of tracking system where you're tracking your set, met, signed, pending? Raise your hand or put a 1 in the chat if you use something. Anybody in here not use anything at all? You're just winging it. I'm like, no, I'm not going to say.
Seems like everybody is using something or unwilling to say they're not.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
Well, you did say, are you just winging it? Accusatory.
on brutally honest. That's what we like.
You don't fit in.
Fair. So Jim, if we were going to, there we go, Alicia. Okay, Excel sheet. So if we were going to say we have our set to met ratio isn't great, Okay,
Yep.
say our sentiment ratio is 50% or less, which I would say is not great. What would be like the top couple of things that you would want to like that you would need to focus on? What specific skills, what exactly would you look at within that conversion or within your conversations that you need to work on to build that skill set and increase that ratio?
Yeah, and well, and some of it too is what is the motivation to set the appointments too? So we've had it before where there was so much pressure to set appointments that we had ISA that was just setting appointments that were not like there was no money at the end because there was no sales. So they were doing that. But I would say the biggest thing that me and Ed had talked about this earlier today is just like again, role playing the conversations that you're struggling with, and set to met is value. Is I think sometimes we go on the call and we just try to get them to say yes without providing any value. And they just feel like they need to get us off the phone. And we've been focusing on the last couple of weeks, our role plays around. I'm trying to educate the agents on how to understand and interpret the market so they can actually be that economist of choice. Gary Keller would say, like Keller Williams was, be that economist of choice. Somebody who they feel like they need to go to get the information. So I think it's really providing value where they actually. So you said a buyer consultation. Is there a benefit to the buyer? Like, and even in that, the benefit to the buyer is you're probably going to save them time. In a crazy market, you're going to get them a house. You might save them some money, and you're gonna, if they're a first-time buyer, like you're gonna go through that process so they actually understand what this looks like, and they got somebody on their side. But if they don't feel that on the phone, they're not showing up. They just said yes to get you off the phone.
I think Mike does such a great job here, maybe too good of a job, Mike Novak. And I'm sure Chuck and your guys' whole team carries that down. But our goal is not to set the appointment. Our goal is to win a customer. And when we start focusing just on the appointment and not the actual relationship and building something that's true and valuable together, then you can set 50 appointments. It's not going to convert. You might luck out on a couple. The true value is when you can relate to somebody on the phone and truly build something. So then you can continue that when you get to the appointment. And so many people, just like you said earlier, Jim, they just want to set the appointment. Hey, I got 2 appointments because the team told them, or their goal says I have to have this many appointments this week. Well, appointment doesn't equal closings. I can promise you that.
I think it's knowing on that phone call, like your goal is connection. It's not appointment setting. And you just said it's connection. It's like, have I connected with this person enough where they actually want to meet with me or meet with the team member I talked about? And if I don't make that connection, you're just another person that they spoke to on the phone.
Sometimes it just takes, hey, I'm gonna follow back up with you in a week because obviously we're not ready right now, right? I love when Mike tells them, it's like, number one, that person's not even serious or motivated or anything. Pass, I'm moving on. That's when you know you're in a good spot, because most new agents at least are like, oh my gosh, I got somebody talk to me. Now I'm going to try to go win. So it has to be true. It has to be real. There has to be some connection, some value on both sides. And they have to want that appointment.
Jen, do you want to expand on, oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're fine. I was just going to say it just has to be that way.
Yeah. Do you want to expand on what you mean about being very discerning on the phone? We had this conversation with our new agent group yesterday.
Yeah. So essentially, when you're on the phone with somebody, of course, you're making a connection, you're providing value, but you can't want it more than them, and you can't want them to be more capable than they are. So in that first conversation, you have to be very discerning and find out how capable they are. You have to ask those questions and not be afraid that you're being too nosy. You're coming at it from a place of authority, and those, financial questions, those personal questions are imperative to whether or not they are going to actually move forward with finding a home or selling their home. So you have to be very discerning. And the more clarity you have, the more you can actually help them. Because if you give them some false hope and then find out they can't transact later, that wastes both of your time. Or if you don't get that discernment and that clarity, they may be wasting your time more than you know. So at the end of the day, it's actually a kindness to both you and this person. If you are very discerning, you do ask those questions, you spend that time, and even if it's slightly uncomfortable, you have to live in that because you're the person that's the guide. It's your job to do that.
Yeah. Well, and if you're on the phone with them and having a conversation just the way you were just talking, like a lot of times I'll hear people have a really good conversation like that, and then they go on the phone and they put this face on. You got to be you, but you got to understand how to guide the conversation and really have, provide enough honesty, like that discerning, also like that honesty. This is the truth. Like you're looking to, if they're looking to do something that's just not possible in our market, we're probably not meeting with them right away, but they're going to have some appreciation, and we're going to save ourselves some time if it doesn't make any sense for us to meet with them.
Yeah, I think what Jen said right at the front is super important, because my set to met ratio is pretty terrible right now. And, like if your pipe is pretty empty, you're inclined to want it more than they do. And so it's like kind of holding yourself back, like I'm willing to waste my time. I'm not willing to waste somebody else's time, right? But that shows up when you set an appointment and you're thinking, I don't know if this person's gonna show up or not. Like the Zillows, it's really hard knowing what it costs for a Zillow lead for us. It's really hard for me to just discard them. And at the same time, like we can't just be a door opener, because as soon as we're a door opener, then they don't show. So it is really the discernment and the self-discipline to say, I'm not going to actually want it more than they do, because we know that we can help them. Like that isn't even in question. What is in question is, will they accept the help?
Yeah, so we gotta have those same standards regardless of where the conversion is right now. Because protect your time so you can actually set appointments with other people that are maybe actually going to transact, that are actually, willing to do something. So if we go the next step in this conversion process, so we're meeting with a bunch of people, but they're not signing. Like, so you got an agent on your team, Ed, and they've met with 5 sellers this month and signed none. Like, where do you go with that?
Well, there's several things that could be going wrong. Number one, their presentation overall. Well, you said set to met. Is that what you said? Met to sign. Okay. So from a met to sign standpoint, obviously they're meeting with these people. Are they connecting? Do they understand their personality types? I think one of the big things is clearly having an understanding of what we're trying to get to. A lot of agents go in and throw up all over their clients or their potential clients, telling them all the good stuff about them. And then at the end, it's like you heard nothing that I said as the client or the potential client. And now I'm not interested anymore. So I wrote this down just a little bit ago. If you feel like you're not doing very well in that conversion from, met to signed, we have literally had some people that have struggled in that area, and we'll say, take an experienced agent with you. You still do what you do. That agent will say nothing. They're just there for support. But man, to get feedback on a real live appointment changes the game, because now you're getting somebody that says, do you realize you do these things? Do you realize you did 85% of the talking? Do you realize, several things that can go wrong there? So we've done that before, and it's been really golden. And as long as the agent's coachable and understands and takes that feedback and puts it to use, it's a game changer in a lot of ways.
I think that one of the biggest unspoken conversion skills for an in-person, high level of conversion is the unspoken things, right? Like the body language, the ability to have the social awareness to see, like, are they picking up what I'm putting down? Right. As I'm having a conversation with this person, like I can't tell you how many listing appointments and consultations that I've sat in. And as I'm like explaining to them about the marketing, that I think they're going to love this, I think they're going to love all these things that I'm doing, and their eyes just start glazing over. Like they are not absorbing anything that I am saying. Right. So I have to look back and say, was it my delivery? Was I actually in tune with what they were picking up? Did I actually convey information that was valuable to them? Right? Like having that level of awareness for in-person conversation is the number one biggest skill that you can learn to convert at a high level in person. Like being in tune with how that person's responding, like continually circling back and saying, not just like, does this make sense? Or, not just how does that sound, but really like, does that sound like something that would work for you? This, your process? Does this work for your timeline? And getting them to engage. So to your point, Ed, in these times, not just on the phone, but in person too, if you are talking more than 25% of the time, you are doing it wrong. Like we have to show up curious, we have to show up inquisitive, and then all we do is fill in the gaps of information with a little bit of education and a little bit of empathy. And that really is what's going to help you convert, is being really in tune with what that person is actually looking for.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned like that person that their eyes are glazing over. The best thing you can do is take that, whatever you're presenting or whatever, and just say, I mean, I'm just going to put this aside. Like, it doesn't seem like this is probably what you want to be seeing or hear. Like, let's talk. Just really calling it out. Because Ed said it again. So from the set to met, we talked about connection. Met to signed, connection again. Because people they got to know that you care. And if you're just in there talking about what you can do and not asking questions about them to understand what they want and shifting your conversation based on what they need, they just know you as some salesperson. You're not connecting with them. They don't trust you.
The whole point of, and I'm sure everybody on here does this, but the whole point of that first part of the meeting is to find out what's important to them, right? And so I shouldn't be glazing over if you're covering the things that they said that were important to them. Now,
Yes.
If you go in and just, here we go, this is my presentation, I do it this way every time, and you have to listen to the whole thing, that's not going to go well.
Yeah, and it's got to be connection. It's got to be connection every time, and if we we don't want to skimp on telling people what we do. They kind of have to know what we do. But if that's all we're talking about, it feels like somebody's trying to sell me windows or something, and it's not going to work.
I also want to add, it's okay if you get in front of somebody and in that first, person to person, you get to know them better. You can read their body language. You learn that they are not ready. They will be. They're not ready right now. And that's the reason that you don't sign. Like I just went on a home, like a listing presentation yesterday, and this woman is recently widowed. She's got a lot going on. She's not ready to move. So it doesn't make sense to sign her as a listing client right now. What it does do is make sense to get into a really wonderful nurture relationship with her. And that's okay too. You have to be able to make that call. And that's kind of what Chuck was speaking about. When your pipe is low, you can't want it more than them. You can't rush into it. You can't think, oh, I got to sign them. I got to sign them. You have to do what's right for that person. And sometimes it means hold off, because they're going to get freaked out if you try and push further. And you might lose them altogether. And really you're there to help them, not to just get a signed client.
Absolutely.
100%.
I went on one yesterday. It was kind of the same thing. They're probably moving into an assisted living place. They're not 100% sure what if they're doing that. They even asked me questions about renting the place, which wasn't really a great idea. But I laid everything on the table, and I followed up with them. But yeah, we weren't signing the contract yesterday. It was like timeline wise, It didn't make sense, and it would have felt like I was selling them something in that scenario because they were not ready at this point. They hadn't made 100% made a decision that they were doing it, even though that was going to be the decision that would happen. It's just they needed the time to make a decision. They were actually moving. They were actually selling the house. They needed to walk through those different options, and that's, again, connection, better connection when I do that versus, okay, like I got to go back to the office and show everybody I signed a contract that isn't going to sell, because then they decided they felt like they were pressured into the signing that, and now they ask if they can cancel the contract.
Then your sign to close
So-
ratio gets all out of whack. You know what I mean? So it's sometimes you just have to just do what's the right thing, regardless of what your conversion number is.
So Jim or Ed or Jen too, what are like some tactical things, like specific things that you can learn, that you can implement, that you can execute in an in-person, situation that is going to increase your chance of conversion? Like what physically, what things can you say? What specifically can you look for?
I think having number one of practice, but number two, have an organized method in which you're going to go about it. I think we're the experts. We should be in charge. And so if we let them drive, it always gets wacky. We have to drive because we're the experts. So we have to, we've got a 4-part thing we do. First we do this, then we do this, then we do that, then we do this. And it's based on everything on the client. So you want me to go deeper in on those questions, I'm sure, Rachel. And I number one, we need to know motivation, right? Why do you really want to sell? And we've talked about this 100 times on the Agent Growth Hub. We do not go surface level, we go deep. We go deep in the questions, 3 deep, 4 deep, however you want to go. It's all done through conversation. But when we ask, why are you wanting to sell? And they say, well, we just think it's time. Well, what the heck does that mean, right? So I think you have to go super deep to get to the true why they want to sell, the true motivation, and the other things that you're going to be asking, right? I'll let somebody else talk now.
Well, you kind of said it, Ed, the way you go deep is you don't ask closed-ended questions. You don't assume you understand things. Is you just ask. Like the appointment I was on yesterday, my question, we sat down and I said, okay, well, I mean, you're thinking about selling the house. What's the plan? Like very open-ended question. And that gets, like Rachel said, like if I'm talking more than 25% of the time, there's an issue. It's like, what's your plan? And I just let them talk about what their plan was, rather than say, oh, is your plan to go sell the house and move to here? It's like, no, what is your plan? So
Are you in a position to sell?
Yeah.
Most people don't know how to answer that question. I think I am. I don't know.
I think a tactical thing you can do to prepare for your face-to-face appointments is, I mean, we always talk about role play, but you can frame it in a way that really makes you bend your skill set, such as, okay, Rachel, I have an appointment and this person on the phone to me read really high S and they need to move, but they don't want to move. Can we role play this? Versus, okay, I was on the phone with a really high C person and they are buying their second home, they're upsizing and they're pumped. That's a totally different conversation. You can get really specific, especially after you've had your appointment set. Go find somebody that has good conversion and has been doing it a while, and sit down and say, okay, here's the situation. This is the personality type that I just sat with. Here's a few details. Can we role play this? Somebody that's really good at conversion will probably be able to turn into that person well enough so you can practice that body language, practice pivoting. Your normal cadence, like you were saying, Ed, about we first do this, then this, then this, and this, that can be flipped on its head based on what that person needs. And you should be able to kind of frame that in your mind before you even walk in. That will highly improve your statistical chance of making that final really sound connection with them.
Right.
I think making sure that you are aware of your body language, like those are kind of like some of the intangible things, like when you're in person, like making really consistent eye contact, being really aware of the facial expressions that you're making sure that you're not sitting there like this, with your arms crossed the whole time. Like just little things that really actually make a big difference, right? Can you imagine Mike Novak like sitting there with his big biceps like this the whole meeting and like trying to have a conversation? Like it's going to be
Most
intimidating.
people would
You're
say,
not
I'll
getting
sign.
like, what do you need me to do? Yeah, exactly. But like body language is such a big unspoken part of in-person lead conversion, being able to explain things, being almost excited, like not sitting back in your chair and explaining things, but like being up, being present, being, like walking them through things actively. I think those are all tangible things that you can work on, and that they express confidence, right? When you're expressive, or you're using your hands and you're able to point at things throughout the consultation packet, or you're able to look people in the eye and listen and nod your head when they're saying things and letting them know that you understand. Like these are tangible things that will increase your conversion in person, and they're not really talked about very often. All we talk about really is like the objection handlers and how do I say this, and the language patterns, which are all important as well. But let's just not forget, in-person conversion and the ability to connect with somebody is a significant percentage of it is body language. So
Well, quite honestly, that's why most of our agents, and I don't know how you guys do this, but I tell our agents to immediately want to sit at a kitchen dining room table versus the couch. The couch never feels formal enough to me. You're like, hey, yeah, so I'm gonna, like, what the heck are we doing here? It just, because what you just said, Rachel, all that stuff's important. And if I'm wallowing on their couch trying to present something, that's probably not going to go over very well.
That reminds me a lot, Rach, of we got to hear Alex Hermosi speak at a Real conference. And one of the things he spoke about was how charisma is not something you're born with. It's a skill you build. So like remembering people's names and saying it a bunch of times, shaking their hand when you meet them and when you leave them, looking them in the eye, all of these key pieces of what makes somebody charismatic and memorable are things you can practice and actually learn to do naturally yourself. But it does take practice. You have to be mindful of it. And if you want to go ahead and look up the definition of charismatic, look at what it says and notice that they're all body language. It's all how you greet people, you engage them, you look them in the eye, you shake their hand, you say their name, you speak clearly, your shoulders point to them wherever they are in the room. All of these sorts of things, they're to Rachel's point, body language pieces, tone of voice pieces, and it is a skill you can grow. Nobody's born with charisma. Some have a little bit more easily, they learn it more easily than others, but every single person in this room can be called charismatic if you put work into it.
Me too. So all of us.
You too, Jimmy.
You got it, Jim.
I can see it coming out right now.
Yeah. Well, when you were talking about this, it reminds me also, just like we didn't really use the words, but it's kind of what Rachel said, like that mirror and matching. People need to feel like you're like them, and and it could be the way you're sitting. It could be, it could be your rate of speech. Like if that person is like super slow to speak, you don't want to, go so slow that they think you're, making fun of them, but like slow it down a little bit or speed it up a little bit. Just make them feel like they are like you, just a little bit of change in the speed of everything.
Well, the mirror and matching is not only just tonality and things like that, words, but it's also knowing, like Jen said earlier, a high C is totally different. You better know what the high C is going to want versus what the high D wants, and you better give it to them. High C's, overload them with data. That's what they want. You're not going to sell a high C crap. They're going to make a decision based on facts, right? And high D's just want you to do it. They don't care about how, when, what. So just get it done. So know what you got. Try to know what you got when you're going in. And obviously I tell all my agents, we have to learn how to do this because we don't get to send them to disc before we show up to their house. So we know exactly what they are. So we better ask good questions to hear the responses to understand what we're working with.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing we as we go through this conversion I don't know, pipeline or whatever, is we start signing people. How do we, we have that issue, okay, we signed a bunch of people and nobody's actually buying or selling, like nothing's going under contract. Really, we gotta look at, okay, why is that not happening? And I think a lot of times it stems in from that appointment where we didn't set realistic expectations. And I think Jen said earlier, it's just like that, being very honest with people. And, especially like I know in our market with a lot of first time buyers, we got to be super honest. Like it's hard. It's really, really hard right now. And you're probably gonna, go 50,000 over on one of these houses. You're going to be competing against no inspection, things like that. And, in that consultation, talking about what are the strategies in this price point that you need to really look at. And I think it's also the agents, I tell the team members, make sure you know the market these people are buying in really well, as to, is it a super strong seller's market? Is it a little bit softer? What do you actually have to do? Because if you don't bring all those strategies up in that consultation, as soon as you go out there and start looking at houses and they want to do a list price offer, you're gonna eventually get fired because you didn't educate them and sometimes even like scare them out of doing it if they don't want to go down that path, and they'll appreciate you more for it.
I think that's ongoing too. Like if you've got a client who, because of their life schedule or whatever, can't devote the time to go in 30 days, and they've looked over several months, several months in a lot of markets changes dramatically where they started and where they're at now. And it's your job to educate them along the way. I have a client right now who's in that exact same shoes, and she wants to stick to what she was looking for 8 months ago. And I'm like, I'm so sorry, but the market has kind of passed you up. So we kind of have to either change your condition, your location, or your price, or we're not going to find you a house. And that truth telling has to be ongoing. It's your job as their guide. You can't just say, oh, we talked about it 8 months ago and now they're unreasonable. That's really on you to keep them updated.
Ongoing storytelling. That's what I like to call it, because those stories are factual stories that, hey, I want to tell you, I had another client that went through this just recently, and I always like to educate from experiences. You're exactly right, Jen. That hits home runs all day long.
Well, it's just reminding ourselves that we are not tour guides, we're consultants. That's what we're hired to do. A lot of people in our business are tour guides, and they will continue to sign people or not sign people and show them lots and lots of houses and never actually get a house for them. And the buyer doesn't know why. Buyer has no clue. Like we've taken on clients where, once we have that consultation, we have those conversations, we get them under contract, and they've been looking for a year because they were looking at the wrong houses and, that they couldn't finance, or nobody ever had an honest conversation with them about what the market actually looks like. So I think somebody said it, like you got to be the professional. Like, how to do this. They do this once every 10, 20 years, you do it every day. Don't let the non-professional dictate the professional's process. It doesn't make any sense. Even more so on the listing side, if we just follow the process that the seller wants, the seller's going to get a non-professional process that doesn't get the results that will work. So I think it's having that confidence. Like if we're in the business a while, it's easy to say, hey, I'm confident, I've done this a bunch of times. But if we're on our first few listings, but we've learned the right way to do things, we have to have that confidence that 3 listing sales is better than 0. So you're more of a professional than the seller is. Have that confidence and go in with a plan and follow that plan and make sure you educate them. If we go off plan, I don't know what the results are going to be, because this is how we do it. This other way it might work, it might not, I don't know. Any other thoughts on that step in the conversion?
Are you going to do the last part of the conversion? Under contract to closed?
Yeah, the bulletproof in the transaction.
Yeah.
That's you have to talk about that right now. There's a huge fallout rate in contracts right now.
So I've been having that conversation with a lot of agents on my team, is like, I feel like we've had the weirdest stuff happen. And you know, our business is doing pretty well, and I think it's doing well because we don't give up. So I recently had an attorney that just said like, hey, I'm done. Like we're not gonna, you know, I'm not gonna do anything more in this. And really as agents, we have to say, okay, what is the solution? We need to be willing to do whatever it takes and call whoever we need to call to get these things to the finish line, because there's not as many opportunities to get to the finish line. And, you know, we're going to have these weird scenarios. So, you know, like you know, had a scenario right now that's this property that's sitting on railroad property with no easement, and the attorney gave up, and I'm like, okay, well, we're not doing that. We're going to go find a solution. I'm working on it. I don't know what it looks like. Kim is like big digging through deeds, doing what an attorney would do typically in our state to try to figure this out. And bulletproofing the transaction, setting expectations up front, setting expectations throughout the process, but also not giving up when it gets to that point in the end. And knowing things like if I think of some of the things we've seen lately is, you know, we had, you know, agent first sale, does a home inspection, sends a spreadsheet from the buyer with all the home inspection issues, with the cost of all of them, and wanting all this money off. And you know, I think it was Rich's deal, and Rich had to educate the agent, and the agent was luckily educatable. I don't know if that's a word, but to actually teach them like, hey, that's not how this works. But being willing to have that tough conversation with a buyer or seller the seller who says, hey, it's a seller's market. Like I can leave, you know, all my crap behind because the buyer's going to buy the house. And it's like, no, actually they don't. So having those tough conversations throughout the process, and be willing to call somebody's bluff sometimes, you know, because a lot of times what will end up happening as a real estate agent is you get close to that finish line, and that seller or that buyer finds some way to dig into your commission and pull out a big chunk because they didn't feel like doing something they said they were going to do. Like they didn't replace that dishwasher. Now you're getting a closing table. You know, who takes care of it? I usually
think that so go ahead, Jim.
I was just saying, I usually
I think that, you know,
until we get to that point where we actually do have to close the deal.
One of the biggest, I don't want to say misconceptions, but I think that one of the things that is not taught very often to agents is that we have to negotiate sometimes with our clients just as much as we have to negotiate for our clients.
Yep.
Right. And that is a huge part. Like this is the part we speak about on our team. This is a point of conversion. When you're in contract, people start freaking out. They start seeing actual numbers. They start going, oh shoot, like I'm actually about to drain my bank account in 3 weeks and to close this deal. Or oh shoot, I'm gonna have to cut this huge check. Or oh shoot, I'm gonna have to actually move into this place and close on this deal. Like people start freaking out, and it usually won't come up as that exact issue. It will come up as, well, I decided I don't like this part of the kitchen, or I don't like the color of those walls, right? Like they come up with all these things, right? That all these other reasons. And it's our job to bring them back to center and remind them from the beginning of this process why we got into this and why this house was a fit, right? And I think a lot of agents are afraid to negotiate with their client in regards to keeping them in contract and keeping them there. Now, our job isn't to talk somebody into staying in a contract that they absolutely don't want, or talk them into staying, you know, purchasing a home that is, you know, a pile of poo. Like we need to obviously have some discernment when it comes to this. But if they are freaking out and there's no apparent reason other than they are scared and they are fearful, it is our job not to just tell them to suck it up, but to truly kind of negotiate with them and make sure that they understand the perspective and you know, nurture them through this process. And sometimes that is even harder than the original conversion. I've had multiple contracts, multiple people that I've had to keep in contract that I've had to kind of nurture through the entire escrow process all the way to the closing table. And that's a huge point of conversion, right? And also, like in an inspection, like if a buyer comes in and you haven't set expectations up front, or maybe even you have, but they've forgotten, and you're wanting to negotiate things with the contract, but you also know the market, and say you beat out 4 other offers and now you're in this situation, you have to, again, relay the reality of the situation to your client and reframe the situation for what they can or cannot ask for. Right? Like this is part of setting the expectation really, really tough with your client, and then being able to go to the agent on the other side and get a win after you set an expectation that it's not, maybe not possible or not feasible. And then you actually do get something. Like that's how you become more valuable as a real estate agent in your clients' minds and get wins for them, is not by saying, no problem, I'll go get that for you, and then not being able to. It's, look, this is what happens if we don't get this. This is the kind of market that we're in right now. It's unlikely. Here is what I will attempt to ask for. But at the end of the day, we bid out 4 other offers, and they could go back to any of them, and they could cancel this contract and deny all of our inspection requests. And then when you go to the agent and say, the other side, you're negotiating the other way and being like, well, my client really wants to move forward, but this and this and this are going to be a deal breaker. And if you go back on market, after an inspection contingency, it's not going to look good to the market. You're not going to get this number again from any of the buyers that are coming in, right? You're being able to kind of play both sides, so to speak, but then being able to get a little bit of a win for your client after you set an expectation that you may not have, you're going to be very valuable. So I think that's a huge part of conversion, is being able to negotiate both sides during the contract.
We found early on when we got into real estate that most people do not really understand a contract. They just think, well, I just sign here because I want to buy something, like they're signing the receipt saying, yes, I want it, but that's it. And so what we have done is we have really tried for our agents to, at the time of signing, let them know, now this is a real life contract. This is not a coloring book page. We are going to go in, and when you sign this, now you're bound by law with the things that are in this contract. So let's make sure we go over these. Let's make sure we talk about these, because I don't want you to come back in a week and go, oh my gosh, I didn't want to do that. We need to know that now, right? So a lot of people in the world today just think they can sign anything and they're not bound to anything. And so we really try to stress that point, because we've seen too much of it over the years. It's crazy.
I think that kind of goes into your, especially with buyers, like your first initial consultation, right? So we, on our team, of course, we follow the buyer consultation that Mike kind of has laid out. He was great at kind of being on the forefront of that. But essentially what we do is we talk about, hey, we don't want to write an offer for you unless you're 110% on the house, because when we do write that offer for you, we're going to go really aggressive. We're going to really make it so that seller almost can't say no to you. And that locks you in many ways. And here are the ways. These are the strategies we use where we take care of you and make sure you're protected, but at the minimum amount of risk to the seller. So that would mean this contingency and that contingency. We go over that in the consultation. So then when it comes time to write the offer, we go through each one and weigh, okay, are we going to use this? Are we going to shorten it? How are we going to do it? And that way you're reiterating the guidance you've already given them. So you are the truth teller and the guide. They trust you at that point because this is all coming to fruition, which they've heard already. And then when the time comes for that inspection to happen, you've already said, hey, when we wrote this, we strategized this way for these reasons. Now we see these things. We have big potatoes and small potatoes. Which big potatoes are going to make you want to say, I don't want the house? And you have to really break it down, but it's repetition that they need to know that you're there for them, but you're also there to make sure their goal is met, right? Protection, but also achieve the goal. And I think for me, in the times that I've had really hairy inspections, cycling back to that has been the key piece to have that repetition where I'm already, you've heard the truth. Now we're living the truth. Like, let's get through this.
This was good. Me and Ed talked about, like, I wonder if we can get an hour out of this, and I feel like we probably have more. But I think going back to, we talked about the steps on all of the like what it looks like in each section is going back, if you're tracking the numbers, and see, is there a weak spot either personally or on your team where something's not happened, and really go ahead and dive into that and try to fix that specific problem, rather than just trying to say, okay, we're just going to role play stuff and get better. Figure out where you're lacking and just just start role playing those scenarios based on the conversations we had today. So I think that's it for today. This was a great session. Glad you guys were all on. Have a great week.
Appreciate you guys.